Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite modcast. Today, we have a 1v1 on Greentooth Gorge. Our first player right here is ManOfFaith, playing as the Kommando Nob, sneaky orc who does quite a bit of damage, but is more focused on subterfuge. His opponent is RiceMuncher, playing as the Hive Tyrant. Very different from that sneaky Kommando Nob. This is a very tanky melee hero that cannot be knocked down or suppressed and walks through cover. So then, second cast, coming back. Things have changed in the landscape of Dawn of War 2 replays. At this point, it's actually pretty hard to find 3v3 replays. The well of GameReplays.org has kind of dried up. Meanwhile, 1v1 replays are actually in abundant supply. On the Elite Mod website, dawnofwar.info, there are a couple dozen 1v1 replays uploaded every single day. And I've always loved a good 1v1. I know they're not quite as flashy, so they usually don't might make quite as good of a spectacle for casting, but I've always loved the strategy, seeing the high-level play. Meanwhile, over here we've got the Hive Tyrant coming around along with a squad of Hormagaunts, making an offensive push on the natural power node for ManOfFaith, and they are going to get a decap, which I think will stall out ManOfFaith's power supply quite a bit. He's going to try to counter with a power bash on the power generators for RiceMuncher, but RiceMuncher has already noted his power point. He's also got that generator. It's generating power even though it has taken some damage, and it doesn't look like he's actually going to get a finish on that, while RiceMuncher has gotten a decap on the power point, the natural power point for ManOfFaith. And right now I'm referring to him as ManOfFaith, but according to what I've heard, ManOfFaith is actually Tex, the legend, player who has been around for a very long time, at least as far back as I can remember, because he's probably been around longer than me. He was playing and he was considered one of the best Dawn of War 2 players at a time before I had even casted the game. So we're talking back in like 2011, really when this game had first come out, and for all I know, possibly even before that in Dawn of War iterations prior to Retribution. It's hard to even talk about those because I practically forget that they exist, since so much of my relationship, which is a weird word to say, with Dawn of War has been with Retribution. But right now, I'm feeling like this is a lead starting off for RiceMuncher, and although Tex is certainly a well-known name if ManOfFaith is indeed that person, RiceMuncher is not someone who I am as familiar with, but from what I gather, he is quite a good player. Not much in terms of VP pressure, RiceMuncher with a modest VP lead, but I think what's even stronger is that he's got that lead in the economy, I would say, since he was able to get that early decap on Tex's PowerPoint. And part of what that means is ManOfFaith has had to adjust his army buying strategy. His 4 Tier 1 units, they're all units that were bought without power, so they're all base Tier 1 units, and I'm sure he did that in part because he knows that his economy has already been severely disrupted because he did not node this quickly enough to prevent the decap, while RiceMuncher noted this quite early. He's got the triple generators. This one looks like it's just being built, but still he's got a significant lead economically. Tech's starting to take a victory point lead, but in the long run, I would be more concerned about his disadvantage economically. And RiceMuncher, with that economic advantage, he's managed to get his first Tier 1.5 unit. Tier 1.5 unit referring to Tier 1 units that require power to be bought, because you would not be able to buy them right out of the gate. You would need to wait until you have enough power to buy one. And they've been upgraded to the Barb Strangler, which I feel like usually isn't considered a particularly powerful choice, but a big part of the reason that RiceMuncher probably picked it on this map, aside from being able to suppress the Shooter Boy squads, is for the use of dealing with garrisons, since this is one of the few maps where garrisons actually play a pretty big role. and we are going to see RiceMuncher take this engagement right here, taking an aggressive triple Hormigaunt build at the start. Gives him a lot of pressure, while ManOfFaith's build is a lot more shooty. So here we are going to see that garrison play. And another reason why I think that Barbed Strangler Warrior comes out is since RiceMuncher went with that aggressive Hormigaunt play, he doesn't have a lot to deal with garrisons. But of course, what he's going to do here is he's not going to deal with the garrisons. He's just going to ignore the garrison and use the massive amount of melee DPS that he has to start taking down some generators and power nodes. And it looks like he'll at least get maybe one generator. I don't know. I think part of the trouble is that he did have them split on their damage, and the Hive Tyrant is now focusing on tying up these shooter boys. So we ended up only getting the single node so far, which also produces less power than the generator. But it looks like he is going to finish out a generator. And I think that was ultimately a pretty good win for RiceMuncher. Didn't suffer any significant losses. Took some mono losses, but I mean, that's to be expected on a squad as squishy as Hormigaunt's. But getting the node, requiring Tex to node it up again. And Tex has not been able to get equivalent power bashes. And part of the result we're seeing out of this is that RiceMuncher now has purchased Tier 2. He actually started it quite a while ago. It's actually about to finish, while ManOfFaith Tex hasn't even started yet, and it's not looking like well, he's going to get there somewhat soon, but he's going to be starting it after RiceMuncher is already in Tier 2. Now, out of all the races in Dawn of War 2, I guess I would maybe say Tyranids are one of the less intimidating races to be at a tier disadvantage, and particularly the Tier 1, Tier 2 disadvantage, since they aren't going to have anything that has vehicle armor. But they're still going to have access to Tier 2 units, which are intrinsically usually more powerful than Tier 1 units. Of course, this isn't a game where units are just strictly better than another. In all cases, we do have just units that serve different functions. And we are going to see this Kommando Nob right here. Well, I was going to say, trying to tie up the Barbed Strangler Warriors. I'm not actually sure what he's going to really achieve here. This fight is going to be a stalemate for a little while, but eventually the Kommando Nob will indeed lose. So, Power Bash on the node is going to happen right here. Hormigaunts have been upgraded to have adrenal glands, giving them increased health and damage. I did actually need to check that to, you know, see what that did anymore. It's been so long. Tyranid's not exactly a race that I was the most familiar with anyway. I mean, of course, when I was more active, I certainly had knowledge of what the units are, what the abilities are. I probably could have told you what the abilities are better than many people who actually played Tyranids. But they weren't a race I was intimately familiar with. Not one of my favorite races to play. I was never a big fan of the space bug type races. Excuse my heretical comments, but you know, I'm just noticing the similarity that Tyranids have between other similar science fiction races. Anyway, Tex actually seems like he's on quite the back foot, in my opinion. He had the VP lead, but I think that's going to pretty quickly start turning around in RiceMuncher's favor. He does have the triple cap, and here we do see the Tyrant Guard. So the Tyrant Guard is the closest thing that Tyranids have to a vehicle, but it has super heavy infantry armor instead of vehicle armor, which it's still quite tanky between the base health of 2500 that it has and the super heavy infantry armor being highly resistant to the piercing damage of the shooter boys. But it's not quite impervious to piercing damage the way an actual vehicle would, even though impervious is technically wrong as well. Alright, we've got some boys who are not as hidden as they think they are. At least that's not how it looks. I don't know if maybe it's just a visual bug, but at least the way it's showing in this replay, it showed all of the sluggers except for the Nob to be infiltrated, and it looked like RiceMuncher was just chasing them around. He's trying to kite them around. Meanwhile, we've got a lot of DACA going out there. And this is a very strange fight to be happening. It feels like very little is actually happening. It's more like they're playing Ring Around the Rosie. But there the sluggers finally take some significant health damage. They lost one model as well, and there's a decent chance they take another one. And the shooter boys can't actually stop that approach. I mean, at best, they could suppress 2 of the Hormigaunt squads, but oh, I wasn't paying attention to this weird boy. I even wonder if it would have been possible if he could have not retreated the shooter boys so that he... Oh, actually, wait a minute. Well, shooter boys are back in here, but there is that full retreat. I was hoping that with the weird boy in there, that could have been enough of a melee counter to keep the shooter boys in, but he ends up doing the full retreat, which of course means we're going to have yet another generator bash coming out from RiceMuncher, and we're seeing further paths in the the progression of this game. With now ManOfFaith is getting the war truck, but RiceMuncher is getting his way all the way to tier 3. We are going to see another power bash, and this is a game where RiceMuncher is going to be really perpetually ahead. Unless it gets to really, really late, since obviously you can't go any further than tier 3, and ManOfFaith does actually manage to catch up. The Tyrant Guard has actually been pretty oppressive, with ManOfFaith having very little to deal with it, very little in terms of very effective damage to the super heavy infantry armor. So here is that war truck. Can't tell if anyone's in it right now. War truck, the orc transport, coming over here, I think, to try to help the Slugavoys. And I think the way this is going to work out, this will probably end up being the first successful power bash that ManOfFaith or Tex will have. He's got the support of the war truck. He's got now Burners on both Sluggers. So we are going to see the generators go down, but it's going to be a trade. Hive Tyrant upgraded with the Crushing Claws for that 108 melee DPS. No sort of utility or ability that comes with this because of the fact that you're getting a weapon that has such raw power. And that's just the point of that. So probably the highest damage to the Tyrant Guard are the Sluggers themselves. But engaging directly with the Tyrant Guard means they will have to deal with suffering their own model losses. Tech's going to get the decap here. Probably going to have to retreat after this, because I think if he stays any longer, he does risk the Kommando Nob going down. Meanwhile, we're going to have an engagement going on in middle. Barb Strangler Warriors are forced off. They're actually pretty close to dying, but I think they will get out of there alive. And, oh right, the Crushing Claws there to try to deal with the war truck. And the war truck does go down. I was wondering if it would be able to drive away, but it does not. So we see the war truck already going down. That's going to be pretty bad for Tex, because he's still stuck in tier 2. We've got RiceMuncher in tier 3, and his resources are looking pretty good, which means at some point, you know, I'm expecting to see a Carnifex or a Swarmlord to come out for RiceMuncher, and ManOfFaith actually just going to go for another war truck. And that's kind of tricky. I feel like his plan there is, I think it's going to be focused largely around more so the Slugger Boys than the Shooter Boys, since the Slugger Boys are, again, still the best thing he has for dealing with the Tyrant Guard. But the Shooter Boys, I think, will inevitably have to play some part of that as well, since they're there to help control the Hormigons. And RiceMuncher, as far as I can remember, has not lost a single squad or unit. But it might be time for the Tyrant Guard to go down. At about 40% of its hit points, will charge to get out of there. That does bring it further away, and I'd say that kind of brings it out to safety. Except for now, the fact that it's re-engaging against the Sluggers. So second war truck is here. It's not exactly the most expensive unit, but the war truck, of course, needs to be careful about the Hive Tyrant. And it's so easy to mix up Hive Tyrant and Tyrant Guard, with those having the word Tyrant in them, obviously. But I'll take a quick look at RiceMuncher's resources. He's very close to the Carnifex resource count, and with how strong his economy is, especially now he's actually got double power nodes, there's definitely no doubt that he could just wait for the Swarmlord if he really wanted. And even doing that, he would still be way ahead. But we are going to see the Tyrant Guard taken out well, ManOfFaith took out the Tyrant Guard. And look at this. I actually really like this Tank Buster pick. And I mean, the Tank Buster pick is just, it's showing his understanding of the game, and it's not even a deep understanding of the game. I think for those of you who do play the game regularly, the Tank Buster pick, it makes complete sense, despite the fact that RiceMuncher doesn't have a vehicle right now. What ManOfFaith obviously knows is that he's fighting against a Tyranid player who is most likely in Tier 3. And at some point, a Tyranid player in Tier 3 means you're going to be facing down a Carnifex or a Swarmlord eventually. Of course, your other option is to get a Lictor, which, I mean, you can do that, and a Lictor is still, you know, a pretty powerful unit. But just more commonly, I think it's just always been more traditional for Tyranid players to just get, especially the Carnifex, with the Carnifex being cheaper than the Swarmlord, and the ability to get more than one of them. That we fully expect to see the Carnifex, and here it is. But we're going to still take a look at this fight over here, and I think RiceMuncher actually looks like... Oh, he does try to retreat those Hormagaunts. He loses them. I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't care if he loses the Hormagaunts at this point. I don't feel that he needs to keep 2 squads of Hormagaunts that badly. We are going to see the Carnifex go for the Barb Strangler, and this... the thing is, the Carnifex, even with the Barb Strangler, is still going to do just fine in melee because it's a big unit with vehicle armor that will still beat most other units in melee. Even the Sluggas, since the Sluggas have regular melee damage, except for their Nob, as long as things haven't been changed. Actually, that was one I'm actually not completely positive on. So let's take a look, and it looks like it's right. The Burner models also gain improved melee weapons, 25 power melee DPS, but even the power melee DPS really isn't enough to deal with a Carnifex, I think. Oh, we're going to see the Hive Tyrant now equipped with the bonded exoskeleton, so really taking into the tankiness of the Hive Tyrant, giving him 300 extra hit points, as well as the invulnerability ability. An ability that is always a mouthful to say. Some other entire word was about to come out of my mouth. So this is actually not looking that good for ManOfFaith right now. The VP's ticking quite a bit against him. At 307 to 112, still ticking against him. He's going to need to get that victory point back in his favor. And I think it's going to be tough just with the single tank buster squad. If I look at his population, he's at 77. I almost wonder if it would be worth it for ManOfFaith to try to get another tank buster squad. But part of the problem that he's dealing with is that he's already trying to keep up with the reinforcement cost of all of his other squads. Well, he's not going to, and he's maybe not as much, because now he won't be able to reinforce in the field. Oh, I'm not paying attention. I couldn't see that he had another tank buster squad already, because the unit bar was so filled out. So he does have that double squad of tank busters. And I said that mostly just because I really felt he would to adequately deal with a Carnifex, I think he really would have needed 2 squads of tank busters. I think 1 squad doesn't deal enough damage by itself, and 1 squad can also get too easily pressured by even just the Carnifex itself. And this tank buster squad getting pressured by the Barb Strangler warriors. We're still having a lot of rockets going out, but the tank busters will need to get out of there since they were close to dying. And we aren't seeing some upgrades on the Kommando Nob as well, getting the Special Shooter, a shotgun, which gives him a % chance to knock back, as well as giving him the Explosive Shells ability, which is often useful against those squishy, high model count, low HP units like Hormagaunts. RiceMuncher still keeping 2 Hormagaunt squads alive. And this Hive Tyrant also just being something that is very, very oppressive, because since he is a tanky melee hero, you need to focus him down a lot. You can't really do much in terms of crowd control. He can be stunned, but he can't be knocked down, obviously, and stuns being a little less common than knockdowns. And when he is invulnerability up, well, then you can't even focus him down until invulnerability is done. Invulnerability lasting 9 seconds, which also makes him a nuisance for capturing. So invulnerability is on cooldown right now, so I don't think, we aren't going to see the full decap. We are just going to see the retreat, which I think he should have done. Losing the Hive Tyrant at this point would practically give ManOfFaith an opportunity to actually come back in this game. And we see ManOfFaith continuing to invest more in AV. This is a looter squad, so actually technically it could be not AV, but I have a pretty good feeling that it's going to be a beamy looter. have a pretty good feeling, and once the Swarmlord comes out, I feel like ManOfFaith won't even have a choice. I feel like it's either be me Luda or guaranteed lose the game. He's not looking that strong as it is, and he did make a mention earlier on in this game that he felt that Nids outclass orcs, which is something that I can barely comment on myself. Really not sure about that. These tank busters will be able to stay out on the field just a little bit longer, courtesy of the shooter boys supporting them with the suppression to force off that Hormagon squad. So, and if we look at ManOfFaith, he's not even trying to get into tier 3 at this point. I mean, he actually just straight up can't. So he knows that going to use the explosive shells to force off the Hormagon. So right now, ManOfFaith is really making the Hormagons pretty irrelevant, but eventually he still has to deal with the Hive Tyrant, the Carnifex, and the Swarmlord. And at this point, he's got a double cap, but he's way behind in VPs. I feel like RiceMuncher should be winning this game, and I think it's highly unlikely that ManOfFaith comes back. I mean, the game's not over yet, but I think it's just so much vehicle armor to deal with, in addition to this incredibly tanky Hive Tyrant. Where is that Luda squad, by the way? Did it come out at some point? I'm trying to find where it might be contributing. Hive Tyrant might actually go down, and that would be really, really... Well, I don't even know if it would be that helpful at this point. You know, we're going to see a shooter squad possibly go down. Swarmlord able to walk right into base. And I'm going to say it's probably game. Swarmlord might be able to kill the shooter boys in retreat. Does kill the shooter boys in retreat. Where's that Luda squad? Oh, I see. I thought it was going to be a Beamy Luda to try to deal additional AV damage, but he was just using that to try to keep a hold of his natural victory point to prevent the back cap. But I mean, at this point, look at how oppressive this Swarmlord is being. It is just staying in base. The tank busters aren't even there to help deal with the Swarmlord. And I'm sure they were there because they were trying to deal with the Carnifex. They did nearly kill the Carnifex, which, man, if he had killed the Carnifex, that would have been a way to try to help him come back into the game, except for the fact that another Carnifex is already building. So, the Swarmlord being here... Oh, God! You know, with that Storm of Blades, I'm pretty sure that's what the ability is called off the top of my head. Nearly give those Tank Busters one squad. That squad of tank Busters is gone. And the Swarmlord just cleaving his way through these little green fungus. And I almost feel like at this point RiceMuncher is almost being a little BM in the sense that he could actually just get the cap here with the Hive Tyrant. I feel like he could have had a double cap right now, which probably would have led to the game finishing. But he's instead being very, very aggressive with the Hive Tyrant. And the Hive Tyrant can, of course, be aggressive, but he hasn't started actually, you know, doing what he needs to do to win the game. This also gives a chance for the Hive Tyrant to go down. Unlikely, but possible. Oh, the shooter boys actually do it. Good job, shooter boys. But we've now got the double Carnifexes, and this one will be a Thornback Carnifex. I almost put those two words together. Thornback Carnifex getting extra health, as well as the ability to charge. And get some Pheromone Cysts to spawn some Rippers. And RiceMuncher says, okay. Time to die. Trying to go for that back cap. So I understand the purpose of the Ludas now, and it does make sense, since ManOfFaith knows that his attention is going to be so focused on these fights. Back caps by anything other than the Hive Tyrant will be pretty easily stopped, and even the Hive Tyrant, if RiceMuncher is not paying close enough attention, the Ludas actually could kill the Hive Tyrant if he gets too close. What a lull in the action right here. What are we going to see this Kommando Nob do? Okay. So that just gets one of the Hormagaunt squads really low. Probably just going to have to go back to base. ManOfFaith actually holding on right now, against all odds, and with a massive float of 999 red. Sad thing is that since he is in Tier 2, There's no potential for a rocks, and I almost wonder if at this point, no, he doesn't have the resources to tech up to tier 3. I was going to say if he could tech up to tier 3, maybe get a rocks out. Because he's not buying too much more in terms of an army right now. We are going to see a back cap on a requisition point. And I think now this is where things are going to happen. The weird boy, he's caught there, and he's going to need to retreat. That's not good. He doesn't even get to retreat. He is going to die. Maybe he can get some damage on the... Now he's going too far. I was hoping he would be able to get some damage maybe on the Hormigons as he dies. But the weird boy going down... Of course, there have been plenty of things here that should have signaled the end of this game, but the weird boy going down in particular means that Tex is going to struggle quite a bit more with the Hive Tyrant, since there will be no Warp Vomit to stun that Hive Tyrant, since that's also one of the few ways that the Hive Tyrant can be dealt with when he activates invulnerability. The Kommando Nob has to retreat through all that. He gets out of there alive. I felt there was a chance there for him to die, with all that melee converging on him. Meanwhile, Hive Tyrant is still here. Hive Tyrant is probably going to take out this Slugga squad. And, you know, I've been trying to call it so many times before, but I think this will be finally the time where we see the game actually start to end in RiceMuncher's favor. Tex calls it himself. Double cap has occurred. Tex starting to lose his army. And although the victory points still have a little bit more to tick down, Tex just goes along with a retreat. Wow, he stacked up some Luda squads toward the end. One actually with that beamy Luda. And that's it for now. So I hope you enjoyed this 1v1 cast, and have a good night.